Hello and welcome to Macc-Pow at Home, a series of cosy chats with creators from the world of comics and comic art, supported by Macclesfield Town Council. As some of you know, if you watched the first interview I did with Jim Boswell on Wednesday, Macc-Pow at Home is basically the comic art festival that I organise here in Macclesfield, Cheshire, in the UK, but the at-home version, due to the pesky pandemic, we're not going to be outdone. We're going to do an online version, and I'm going to get, which also affords me the chance to talk to creators from around the world. And one such creator is my guest today, Tom Scioli, who I'm going to bring in now. And I've got a few little tricks up my sleeve as well. So I'm going to bring you in, Tom, with a let's have a see, with a huge applause. So how's that for you, Tom?
Awesome.
Yeah, so if you can hear that, the crowd is going wild.
I hear it.
Yeah. So hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's real good to see you.
Yeah, I think we. In fact, actually, I'm gonna do. This is. I've got all these little tricks. I'm actually going to go that way because I think that gives us a little bit more impact, and just so you can see. So I'm going to throw this up so people who might not know your work, because I was explaining to Tom that Macc-Pow is an event that is for comics people, but also in a smaller town, it's to introduce comics to an audience that might not know who they are. So I have these little tricks here, Tom, that I can do that. A little bit of a thing there for you. Tom Scioli, cartoonist, writer, GoBots, fantastic program design, amongst other things, but we'll get into that. And this is something that's quite jazzy. I was quite pleased with Tom. I can do this.
Oh wow!
Look at that. It's like cutting edge television over here, Tom.
It's amazing how we've all, gone from cartoonists to full TV producers.
It's bringing out things in people that they didn't know existed, and I think it's the world that we're in where we've got to adapt to things, and that's some of the things that we'll talk about today. We're going to have a chat for about an hour-ish. About your work. So what is that? I've put your Patreon there.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, the Patreon links aren't very glamorous. They're just a load of numbers and letters.
You can get a concise, like Tom Scioli Patreon link. I just haven't done whatever form I have to fill out to get that yet.
So, all right. So you have to get a certain amount of support or followers.
I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of fill out this.
Right. Okay. Right. And how is so for those of people who don't know, Patreon basically is a way of supporting creators by them putting on exclusive content.
Sure. Yeah. It's it's basic patronage. It's do you like me? Do you like my work? Would you like to see me survive and thrive and make more things? And so you toss some coins towards your favorite creators, but in exchange the bonus that you get is you get exclusive access. I'm basically sharing things that I would never share with anybody except my closest friends and family. It's comics that I'm working on as I make them,
right,
in sketch form, rough form, and then even all the way up into finished form. But these are all comics that haven't been published anywhere else, and at some point I'll start sharing some of it here and there, but it's been 6 months so far, and so far Patreon is the only place where these things have resided.
Right. Yeah. No, I think what I like about Patreon as well, it's you can have different tiers, can't you? So you can get different kinds of supporters. I think you just have the.
I just have one tier. I want to keep it simple. It's for my own sanity, for else's sake. I'm trying to just keep it as simple as possible. Like you said, with learning all these cool TV tricks, it's we in the olden days, all we had to do was write and draw comics, where now it's you got to spin a million plates, have your own TV show. And it reminds me of, do you remember the TV show Max Headroom?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that, how everybody in the world had their own TV show, and the biggest show in the country was the Edison Carter show, and it was basically him walking around with a camera that he pointed at his own face.
We're all becoming it's like Wayne's World, isn't it? We're all we're all creating our own TV shows, and some of them are good and some of them bad. But I think it's fun to see people putting content out there, and I think
sure, yeah.
And I think that's really important. The fact that it's still that people can be creative and in light of everything that's going on, are still feeling creative. I know some people's creativity is kind of dipped, but it's nice to see creators, particularly those creators that you're a fan of, still doing stuff and putting stuff out there and connecting with people in the same way as those creators who perhaps are more up and coming or less known. We're all kind of existing on the same kind of level, aren't we? Really, and which is nice and quite inspiring, I think.
Yeah, it's empowering. It's democratizing. It's it's kind of, it's sort of almost like what you would want the arts and culture to be in a perfect world is everyone has a voice. Well,
it's inclusive, isn't it? Instead of exclusive, and I think that's something that I do at my comic festival. Is a small event in a small town where I've been very fortunate to be able to attract some good names in comics. And what I liked about it, rather than putting like the big names in one place and then the indie people or the people who are making their first comic for the first time in another room, in the B room or even the C or D kind of room. It's now they're literally, you've got your I was very fortunate to have Sean Phillips at the first event, and then next to Sean was a local guy and that kind of thing, and because we literally had a very, very small room, and so it was that kind of thing. So Tom, I appreciate that you're here at this time because bless you. Although
it's early in the morning here, so I got
Well, as promised, Tom, I brought bagels. So so feel free to tuck in and enjoy that with your coffee. Tom, I first discovered your comics. I was trying to have a think about how I was going to talk about this, and it's quite a fun story how it kind of connects together. And I first I knew your comic, the Transformers versus G.I. Joe.
Okay, yeah.
Before I realised who you were, and I think in the old days of when I was sort of growing up in the and collecting comics in the 80s, it wasn't really the only way I would maybe know what somebody looked like in comics was in like this on the Stan's soapbox page in Marvel comics, or the bullpen bulletins where they had the caricature of somebody, and every now and then maybe it was a photograph.
If it was a photo, it would be a very dotty, like really bad reproduction, like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. Jack Kirby or whoever.
I remember John Romita Jr. was Hunk of the Month, I think,
right.
Which I think much to his embarrassment, but he was Hunk of the Month, and I think he had his T-shirt rolled up with the little cigarette packet, which was
Fonzie. I used to do that when I was like in kindergarten. I think he's still the reigning Marvel Hunk of the Month.
If he isn't, he should be, because I also noticed that he's now come back to Marvel. He had he cheated on Marvel with DC, and now he's back doing Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
apparently, which I don't know whether he's ever actually done. I don't think he's done the title before, but
I don't think he's done the title. I mean, I'm certain that he's drawn the characters. Maybe in like Wolverine, Enemy of the State or something like.
I think it was that. I think I saw. So back then. And I don't even know whether it was even relevant to me or important that I knew who these people were. To the fact that the cartoonist Hilary Barter.
Yeah.
So back then, and apologies, Hilary, I had a little Zoom with Hilary last year, and I wasn't brave enough to tell him this because I wasn't sure how he'd take it. But back then, as a 12, sort of 13-year-old, I just
thought he was a woman.
I thought Hilary was a woman.
I did too. Yeah, I've since then met Hilary, and it was a little bit of a shock, but exactly. You just see that, because all you have to go on is the name and the style.
Yes.
And, Hilary's style is like, he doesn't draw like super, like steroid muscle men. So no. That makes perfect sense.
Yes, no, exactly. I thought, well, this is cool. There's a female cartoonist here. I think it was like the first female cartoonist that I knew of, and yet Yeah, it wasn't. So, but yeah, so it wasn't really that important. So, and what I'm getting at is that I realized who you were from watching Cartoonist Kayfabe. And I kept it. I followed your friend Ed Piscator, and every now and then the Cartoonist Kayfabe kept popping up on my Twitter, and I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what the wording was. The kayfabe, I didn't know what a kayfabe was, and so I started following it, and then discovered this channel. So at that point, this is like early 2020, maybe the end of 2019. And I saw that you there was like quite a lot of, I think maybe they've been going for about a year at that point, so there was a big wealth of content there at that point. So I kind of went through it and sort of saw what was there, and the first thing that jumped out at me was you guys talking. It must have been the 30th anniversary of Ninja Turtles.
Okay, yeah. We were in Ed's basement,
right?
Like spiders crawling. It was
okay.
Like, I still have nightmares about that basement. But it looked like the Ninja Turtles would sort of pop out at any moment.
Yeah, no. So I watched that, and I'm a fan, and Ninja Turtles was the first thing that kind of came along for me, where it was like, oh, hang on a sec, there's something different other than superheroes, the kind of things that I was or I knew of in the US comics, and so so it was nice to I kind of connect this to when Star Wars, when they put out the special editions, suddenly, or more so, when I watched Clerks for the first time, was the first time that I heard somebody else, like my friends did, talking about Star Wars. And so when I saw you guys doing that, it was the first time I saw somebody else talking about the Ninja Turtles in that kind of, in a way that your friends would talk about it, talk like that. And so I was fascinated by that, and it was really sort of inspiring to sort of hear you talking about, the history of it, things that I knew, things that I didn't, and then I started watching some of the others. And one of the other ones was you were talking about the Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'm not sure, but I think that might still be like the most popular episode. Like, I mean, because to me it's like, okay, we're doing like the best thing ever. Like, let's talk about like the graphic novel. It's like there's that Watchmen and Mouse. So it's like we're going straight for the top. So I think and it was a really fun conversation and really intense. And like the three of us were coming at it from like extremely different perspectives, and it's an important, work to all three of us.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's incredibly inspiring as self-publishers to see what can be achieved. It's just insane how it went from this idea to then literally blowing up. And it's very inspiring. And so, yeah, I then watched, like I say, I watched the Dark Knight Returns ones and a few others. And around that time, I wanted to, I had this idea of, after watching the Ninja Turtles one, I need to do like a little ninja comic of some sort, and I got this little idea. Then I was inspired more about with the Dark Knight Returns and my love of that comic as well. And then Ed started sharing some imagery of Frank Miller and Klaus Janssen's run on Daredevil. So these kind of things fueled it. And as I was doing this comic, as I sort of got midway into it, I started thinking about doing more, how it would evolve into maybe a second issue and stuff like that. And it became, the idea kind of came to me kind of like this kind of A-Team kind of thing, which then connected, and you'll see where I'm going here, Tom, then connected to G.I. Joe, kind of like that mindset of A-Team, G.I. Joe, which then made me go back to my G.I. Joe comics. Yeah. And then as I'm rummaging around in my G.I. Joe comics, Tom,
there we go.
This is what turns up. And hang on, I've got to remember the cameras. I've got to go this way. So so this was the comic that it wasn't until I suddenly saw that I thought, this is Tom Scioli, the guy that I've been watching on Cartoonist Kayfabe. Yeah. And then it totally clicked. And so I picked this up in, 2014. Yeah. And it's such a cool comic. And I picked this up off of the cover itself, and then I flipped through and saw the wonderful kind of art, and that it was a very sort of classic kind of style. Yeah. There's a sea of comics these days that look very, very modern, and that the style is very it's very painted, and the coloring is very different than the comics that I grew up with. Whereas this kind of linked back to the comics that I loved of the good old days, Tom. But then when I read it, it was quite a different experience from the Transformers comics that we would get. We had a Transformers weekly comic here in the UK.
The UK magazines.
Yeah, so it's that
format. Yeah,
and it basically reprinted some of the American ones, but also then introduced us to the likes of Simon Furman.
Right. Yeah, the original
writer.
Stories.
Yeah, and the creative team of Simon Furman and Jeff Senior, who would then start doing UK versions as well. So it became a big thing, and we had G.I. Joe, but as Action Force. For some reason, we rebranded it as Action Force. I'm not quite sure. And so those things were kind of part of me. But yeah, so when I came to read your comic, it was like this sort of black comedy, and the way the characters were talking in the middle of a battle, and I just thought it was fantastic. And last year, so when I went back to it, it then became my guilty pleasure, Tom, to go onto eBay and buy, rather than sort of get. I know I could get the trade paperback.
Yeah, like there's a big hardcover with all of it. Yeah.
But I like the idea of just buying random issues. So I just went, like I would have picked it up, and you probably did the same thing. You wouldn't get things in order.
No.
You go to the comic shop or wherever. I know you guys in the US would go to the newsstand or even like right, and they'd just be on the rack, and you'd pick up what was just there. I assume that's how it went. So I just started doing that, and then just based off of the covers, I would just buy them, and really got invested in this show, this comic, and somebody I don't know who it was that said it. They called you the Stanley Kubrick of comics, Tom.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll wear it.
I thought that. I don't know who it was. I don't think I didn't come up with that.
Okay.
But the person I thought did told me that they didn't. But they said, "Oh, I'll go along with that."
Yeah,
so
that's going on the back of my next book.
Yeah, well, I think so. Yeah, you could put my name. I'll say it.
Yeah.
Mark Jackson, the Stanley Kubrick of Tom Scioli, Stanley Kubrick of comics. Yeah, so tell me about that comic, and tell me how that comic came about.
Yeah, I mean that particular one you were holding of like the Free Comic Book Day issue, that comic changed my life. Like changed my career, because like you said, it's like, I mean, Free Comic Book Day is a big deal. Like when you're part of Free Comic Book Day, that means that more copies than you probably ever sold of a single comic are going to land in a comic shop, and people who never heard of you or maybe never bought a comic book or haven't bought a comic book in 10 years or something are going to like suddenly have, your work. And so it was like, overnight, just like, people knew who I was, knew what my work was. And it was associated with this comic I did that was probably like that particular issue. It's like, I don't know, 14 pages, 16 pages, something like that. But I spent like 6 months working on that particular comic, because it was like I got the job to do Transformers versus G.I. Joe, and then I was like, oh no, like what am I going to do? And so my wheels were spinning at like top speed, trying to figure out what this whole series is going to be, how it's all going to fit together. And I'm shaking my camera a little bit here.
Don't be nervous, Tom. Don't be nervous. You're amongst friends.
But anyway, well, I'm getting nervous remembering like deadline panic of like monthly comic, and I want it to be amazing. Like this is a great this is a great opportunity. How am I going to do this? And so I just wrote and came up with this like massive, story, basically more or less the story of what came out. I mean, the final form changed along the way, as these things do, but I came up with like a beginning, middle, and end of this whole, like 12 issue, maxi series. And then it was time to like make that Free Comic Book Day book, which I had to do in advance of like the rest of the series, just to get it to stores for Free Comic Book Day and approved. So, I started drawing. So it was like that whole 6 months of preparation that I'd done all went into that one issue. I was like immensely proud of it. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever done, pound for pound, line for line. And I think it's pretty great, and if everybody else thinks it stinks, then I think I better like find some other line of work, because this is like my idea of like what a really cool comic is. So if the rest of the world doesn't agree, then I'm probably in the wrong field. But then it came out and it got like rave reviews, and then like the series itself was a big hit, and so that was the other thing is, okay, that was issue 0. So then when issue 1 came out, it's like, okay, a lot of people like this comic that they didn't have to pay anything for.
Right, yeah.
What's going to happen now? And then issue 1 was a hit too. So we were all off and running.
No, I think it was just, obviously you're playing with 2 licensed properties that people really have a lot of love for.
Sure.
And if you're a certain age, we might be a similar. How old?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, so and so you kind of grew up at a certain time, sort of this sort of golden age of TV and cartoons, and where everybody was kind of watching the same things. There wasn't as much, there wasn't as much choice, but what we got was fantastic, and so so this very much felt to me like somebody who was playing with their toys, and then that was somehow then becoming a comic.
And I was every way I could possibly imagine to write a comic book. Like I was just, I was reading the old comics, I was watching the old shows, and in some cases I was playing with the toys, playing with whatever toys I could get my hands on. And so that I'd be looking at different features and be kind of like, what's that? What does that thing do? And so like just one of the examples was like, you got Soundwave with that, where he's the boombox.
Yes.
And so he's got this little this little hatch in the front that you can stick his cassette tape robots in. So I thought like, oh, that can be like a little prison where he sticks the G.I. Joes.
Yeah. No, I there's all these little kind of subtle things that obviously were uniquely yours. That you've got like the standard cartoon and things that existed in that world and in the film. But that's what I loved about it. Suddenly you're putting these little character traits, things, and making it yours. So by the time you finished it, did you feel like that version of it was your version?
Oh yeah. And even like just from like a creative process standpoint, I thought, if I go into this and think of like all the history behind G.I. Joe and Transformers and all the fan expectations, it would probably be too overwhelming to like actually create. So I decided just I'm going to pretend that I invented all this stuff, that I created G.I. Joe, I created Transformers, and then I sort of have the freedom to sort of bend, twist, change, revise, rewrite, the same way I would with my own original creations. And up until this point, that's pretty much all I did in comics was my own original creations. I sort of, just from like my age and my generation and where comics were when I came in, it was very different from every generation previous to that, where I didn't come in as like a guy, working his way up on, whatever like Marvel or DC thing. I did, my own things. And then after, years of that, now I'm coming into like an established, comic. It wasn't Marvel at that point, it was IDW, but both of those comics were, Marvel. They were like the biggest Marvel comics when I was a kid.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was, I was buying, the Transformers comic, and it's kind of like with Star Wars, because, the Star Wars comics that Marvel put out were filling in gaps in between the films. I was very fortunate to be at the time when I was buying those comics when they were filling in those gaps while you were waiting, and which is a really cool kind of thing, and definitely no slight on the comics that came afterwards, with Dark Horse and then the new ones with Marvel, but there was a certain time and a certain special feeling about those early Marvel Star Wars comics, and I think you kind of captured that same thing with these Transformers, that it was filling a little bit of a gap. Are the things that you did in this are these properties held in the same way as like Star Wars, where you've got fans who go, well, that would never have happened, or is it not as crazy?
the Transformers fandom is one of those like sort of famously protective and,
All right, okay.
you know, and I feel like, and of course that's, you know, there's all kinds of fans of these properties, but that's sort of the reputation, and those are kind of the loudest voices.
Yeah.
And I think since then we've kind of gotten an education in sort of, you know, like what they call toxic fandom and the extremes and all like, you know, all the like horrible things that they're tied to. So like I think the world's just gotten an education in that, like across the board in all kinds of things, not just comics or video games. But at the time, like I didn't know about any of that stuff. So
All right, okay.
I came in here and I thought, hey, I am basically putting every ounce of my life into making the best possible version that I can of this thing that people love. If you're a Transformers fan or you're a G.I. Joe fan, I'm giving you everything I got to make this thing that you love as cool as possible. And I expected to be welcomed in that spirit.
Right.
Was a rude shock.
Right, okay.
The first image or the first like preliminary images of you know, this comic of the cover, I think it was, came out, and like in sort of like the, you know, the Transformers fandom, the message boards and stuff, it was like they were, you know, basically barking at the moon. They were like pulling their hair out. This is awful. This is terrible. And I was shocked. Like I definitely wouldn't be shocked now. I'd be like, oh yeah, this is how it works. This is
Yeah.
the game. This is how the game's played. But I was shocked. I was like, but wait, don't you understand? I love this stuff just like you do, and I'm and you don't see the hours I'm putting in, sweat equity, and this is your reaction, you know. But of course it was an education, and I think you know, anybody who like works in this field or in a creative field has gone through like a similar baptism by fire.
But it's true what you say though, that and that you hit the nail on the head when you say that people don't realize what goes into these things, and so to sort of casually, you know, sort of trash them, is really unfair. There's no thought for how much time and effort and passion that people put into that. I mentioned before John Romita Jr. and he particularly, he's a guy that's been working, you know, he was very prevalent when I was, you know, in the 80s, picking up comics. Like my collection's got so many of his, you know, whatever he's putting out. But he gets regularly kind of trashed by people that they just can't stand how he draws. And yeah, everybody's got a different, you know, we don't all like the same thing, but to go out of your way to really criticize something. I mean, we all do. We all criticize things. You know, it's just the nature of being a human, isn't it? I suppose that.
Sure. I think that you know, where those words are coming from, or where that sentiment or that emotion, that sort of like angry and in some cases hateful thing, it's just kind of part of just the human animal, and it's a part that sort of social media or digital culture is extremely well honed to drawing out of people. I think if you met some of the people who are saying these awful, horrible words, met them in real life, which I have, if you meet them in real life, they're actually like very different. This is like you've almost like tapped into a semi subconscious animal part of them that just rages and like that's what you're seeing. But yeah, it is kind of awful. And you know, we maybe shouldn't be as tapped into each other's subconsciouses as we are currently, but we should kind of view this stuff, you know, that way, and kind of, you know, and get it, which again, like I said, I do. It was very helpful, because as you know, your career advances and as you work on more higher and higher profile things, that doesn't change. Like if it changes, it only gets worse and more severe and like, you know, increases numerically. So I get it. And again, like these are like the voices of a small number of people, and then the larger general public, either like doesn't care or has a more favorable opinion or whatever, and it's just it's not the center of their digital life.
No, I mean you can't please everybody, and so
Sure.
it's impossible to do that. And so as long as you're pleasing the right people, and for the first and foremost, you've got to, if you're working for somebody else, you've got to please your publisher,
Mm-hmm. Sure,
and if they're happy, then everybody else can just sort of
yeah. I mean, you just make this work. The most important thing is just that process of making it. So after that point, it's like, whatever, it's like, it's up to the world, and
Yeah.
so I've done things that I've felt really good about and have been, really well received. I've done things that I felt really good about and, were not as well received. And then I've done things that I was sort of maybe indifferent to that, people really did love and were into. So it's like, it's just that the process is what's important. What happens afterwards? It's nice. It makes it, your whatever, your paycheck or whatever, goes up if you have like, some residual attachment to it. And maybe it makes it easier to get your next job. I don't know. Like I've done some like extremely successful things and then spent like a year afterwards kind of like scrounging around for work, so it's just like there's no like straight line in how these things work. So you just got to focus on the work itself.
Yeah, I mean that's the nature of being freelance, isn't it? That you can have a great time, you can have a terrible time. Has this past year affected how you make comics, or what? Or obviously, I know that in terms of how you connect with people has changed. We're doing a lot more of this, but the biggest thing is that comic events themselves, which I assume that you've done quite a lot of those.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the big thing that's changed is this came out.
Yeah.
Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. So that was huge for me. And then this cation out. I think this might have come out like right before the pandemic. Yeah. So, but it was, it's it was largely available during pandemic time. So those were the big things. And then it's like, yes, all the same stuff we've all been reckoning with. And so, I mean, for me, it's been like more like almost like a personal thing of just kind of like a reckoning with self. You're sort of like the whole world's changed around you. All your sort of coping mechanisms, your crutches, or the things that help keep you healthy and happy kind of just disappear. And so like you got to learn like, okay, well, those obviously those things that maybe I thought were essential aren't essential. How do I, what's the shape of my life? What's the shape of myself if you take all those little, things, all those, niceties out? So I've had that, and I think probably everybody's had, some form of that too.
Have you I follow you on Patreon, so I know that you're doing stuff. So has it made you? Have you been more creative because you've had not necessarily more time on your hands, but or is it affected your creativity? Have you had a surge, or has it been kind of the normal amount of what you would be put? I know that on Patreon you're putting out a lot of. I think what I'm getting from your Patreon is that you're trying out a lot of different ideas to find the thing that really you click with, or maybe there's the bigger response from the people following you, to then turn one of those ideas into something that's more fully formed. Is that right?
Yeah, and I have done and some of the things on Patreon have sort of graduated to fully formed versions, which I then also put on Patreon. But yeah, it's tough because again, there's like the way you feel as you're working on things, and then there's like taking a step back and actually looking. So I mean, and a big change was just Patreon, period. I'd never done Patreon. I hadn't ever even considered it prior to this, but it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is, I'm looking for ways to sort of motivate myself to create. Now, when when you have like a rock solid assignment, like Transformers versus GI Joe or GoBots or Fantastic Four, or even like the Jack Kirby thing, once that got picked up by a publisher, that's like rocket fuel for me creatively.
Yeah.
That's rocket fuel, because there's somebody somewhere who's who's saying, where's those pages, where's that book? And so it kind of kicks me into high gear, this sort of like people pleasing part of that I have or whatever, and it kicks me into high gear, and like boom boom boom, like ideas are and like I'm drawing, and I love that, and I want that as much as possible, and I love it. And so I just finished Jack Kirby: The Epic Life of the King of Comics, this big project, and then after that I got like a couple like sort of small assignments, and like I've written some introductions to like a Jack Kirby War and Romance book that just came out, and then the volume 2 of The Absolute Fourth World Jack Kirby that's coming out later this year. So like little things like that, but I haven't I haven't gotten the knock on the door of like, oh, do you want to write and draw Batman or something?
Right. Okay.
I haven't gotten like a clear defined assignment. So I'm sort of back in that mode that I do find myself in from time to time, where I don't have like a rock solid assignment. So it's like I'm a creative person. I want to create. I want to make comics. So my process is basically what is happening now, where it's like I'm experimenting, I'm playing, I'm trying different things, and that's an extremely pleasurable, enjoyable. Like I really like that phase, but it's not rocket fuel. At least it doesn't feel like rocket fuel. And so I felt, and after like a year of that, I felt like, am I being as productive as I can be? Because I know like in a year I created, like half of the Transformers GI Joe things, and it's like, have I created, but then I started looking at my Patreon stuff, the stuff I posted on Patreon, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of comics. So maybe I have been just as productive.
Yeah.
Felt that, but so that's why it's good to kind of have some perspective and take a look at things, because when you're like inside your own head, it's an echo chamber basically.
So how does it work, without obviously getting too personal, but how does it work in terms of financially with so you work on a big project does that pay up, you get money ahead of the time, at the end, or sort of ahead and at the end that then
but like with like a Transformers GI Joe or something, or Fantastic Four, it's like here's the first 10 pages, here's your money, like
right.
So it's very immediate, and that's why it is kind of like another reason why it's like rocket fuel. Is it's this very easy to understand gut level, like, hey, if I want to pay the bills, I got to draw this comic. So it's again, it works for me. It works, the world I grew up in. This is
you've
how
got you've got to get the job done, haven't you? And I think I've talked to people who are self-publishers, and or maybe who've been at comic events, and I remember having a conversation with somebody at a comic event, and they said, well, I'm just here for fun. It's just a day out. And my mindset was no, because I have a young family, and my mindset is I've got to be. I'm not being mercenary, but this is got to at least. You never know when you do these events whether you're going to sell any comics, but that's why we're doing this. We're fortunate that we get to do these things as our jobs, but it is still our job, and you want it to pay you some money.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the interesting thing, because the creative process, when it's working at best, it really is about play.
Yes.
And letting your mind wander and taking these long detours that seem like they're leading nowhere, and then maybe something amazing comes out of it at the end. And so when you sort of play for your job, that is like a balance you have to strike, because you do have to give yourself room to have fun and play and enjoy yourself. But yeah, then it's also like you gotta the work's got to get done. So that's how I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it as like, this is all part of the process, and something amazing will come out. Will come out at the other end, and just what I've created so far, I'm immensely proud of too. But yeah, like I'm along for the ride, and I think maybe earlier we were talking about like some of like sort of like the downtime or whatever. And I think also, people like when they have like, writer's block or whatever, like that's part of the process too. I feel like, the creative, it's like your whole life. And so even just like when you're going for a walk and you're like, what am I gonna do? Like that's part of the process too, because then something comes there.
Yeah, because I would imagine that that you the ideas are just there; they're bubbling away all the time.
Sure.
You wake up in the night, there's something sort of pops it into your head, and I think it's the time when that isn't happening. Although it is frustrating at times because it kind of can be quite tiring, can't it? That your brain is always kind of, and especially these days when there's so many other things that are distracting us, that you don't want to switch off your phone in case you miss this important tweet that's gonna, or somebody's liked something that you've posted, because we all want that kind of validation, which is nice to have, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword as well, isn't it?
Because, it could kill you. Like, I mean, I think like those kind of like the need for validation from outside sources and stuff. If to whatever degree you have that, make it work for you. Like use it as fuel. But I mean, it can like lead you off a cliff, really. You kind of have to get in like, I don't know, like a spiritual or philosophical mindset where like you are as unreliant on any sort of like outside validation as possible. So that's been like my ongoing project of the past year, is kind of getting like just getting more at peace with myself, with the world, and where prior to that I would have said my number one goal is to have a career in comics. Now it's like that's my number two goal.
Right. Okay. So So well, it's good to have the goals, though, isn't it? I think. So you through the past our conversation, you keep saying this word process, or and so I know from following you and watching some videos and stuff like that, kind of how your process kind of works, and I know it's kind of changed, and I think it kind of or a process of your sorts changed sort of midway through Transformers versus G.I. Joe, where you became where you don't actually ink your comics anymore. They're pencil, and then colored digitally. So tell me, I know that my first interview on Wednesday with Jim Boswell, he's a colorist for 2000 AD, and we were talking about how coloring in comics has changed from the old days where it was assigning values to an area. Now it actually is physically coloring a comic. So tell me a little bit about your process from how you would initially start to then taking it through to a finish.
Yeah, I mean, like I've in the past, over the past, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, I've tried different versions of like a stylus where you draw on a screen or on a pad or whatever, and none of the they didn't work that great for me, like until I got my hands on an iPad with an Apple Pencil in Procreate. It was like, okay, the technology has reached a point where it serves my needs, where it like, okay, this is great. And so that was the big change. That was like the more recent big change. So that's how I've been coloring my stuff. I basically and my style, my working method has been since then undergoing a change. So I'm sort of like on the cusp of maybe like something new. But what it has been for basically, and any of my comics that you've seen in print has been, I do like a rough sketch of what the page is. Previously it was on paper. Now for the past couple of years it's been on the iPad, and I do up that sketch. And when I get it the way I want it, I print it out like full comic drawing size.
Right.
Then I tape it to the back of a piece of comics drawing paper or whatever. And then I put it on a light box, and then I draw my finished drawing in pencil of what this is going to be. So that's like the final revision of it. I scan that pencil drawing back in. I do the colors on my iPad again, color it on my iPad, and then, you know, marry those two things together. I have this like kind of like filter in Photoshop that I put it through that gets everything just the way I like it. I add like another layer of sort of scanned in just paper that you know,
Right, yeah,
a little bit of that weathering, and then
yeah.
that's the finished product. That's now very recently, like I just Rob Liefeld's doing this like Snake Eyes comic, and for the final issue, he's doing like a jam where he's getting a bunch of different artists to ink a page.
All right.
I got my page, and this is my first attempt to create an image entirely digitally.
Right.
So, you know, I'm testing that. I'm seeing like, you know, have I gotten to a point with this iPad that I could make something that's like indistinguishable from my, you know, pencil on paper work. Like, you know, so, and again, I've tipped my hand by saying it here, you know, you've got an exclusive, Mark. But so I'm doing it entirely digitally and seeing what that looks like and how it looks. And like, you know, I haven't seen it in print yet, but from where I'm sitting, it looks really good. So maybe, you know, I'll be doing more of that. The thing that I'd like about that is I would like to get Adobe and Photoshop out of my life. They're
Really?
prohibitively expensive, and I don't like this subscription model that they have now. So I want it the fuck out of my pardon my language. I want it out of my life. And so there's like one little thing that Photoshop does that makes my work look the way I want it to look. And if I can do it without that, then I can be done with this whole enterprise.
Yeah.
So, you know, fingers crossed.
It is frustrating because we have the Creative Cloud suite, which I'll give you a tip, Tom. That if you do any teaching, you can get a teacher's discount.
Sure, yeah, I've done some teaching. Not recently, but that's interesting. I'll look into that. But like,
just do like just check in for an hour, just sort of tell them a few things, and then that's, you know, get the school to sign off on that, and you can be living the dream back with the Creative Cloud. But yeah, I think they saw an opportunity, didn't they, just to sort of corner the market there, and you can feel, well, I don't know what else to do. I've got to do this. But I think it is fascinating how people are now using iPads to literally from start to finish. So did you do the Snake Eyes? So that was, you said it was a comics jam, but it wasn't your inks over the top of Rob's pencils.
It was Rob penciled a page.
Oh, right, okay, right.
Digitally sent me this penciled page, and now I'm inking it. But again, it's not going to look like, you know, if everything goes to plan, it's not going to look like ink. It's going to look like an extremely polished pencil drawing,
right?
You know, printed. You know, but there's not. I'm not using a pencil. So
do you own the lines in terms of that when I look at the Rob Liefeld page, that it's going to be more Tom than Rob?
No, I mean, I've done several versions of it because I was kind of excited about this like opportunity to like closely study, you know, an artist whose work I'm you know, in awe of, to closely study it and you know, bring it, you know, to the page. So I've you know, put a lot more effort into this than a typical page of comics drawing. I've drawn it multiple ways where it's like I did a version where I treated it, you know, like I said about Transformers and G.I. Joe, I treated it as like, I'm going to pretend that this pencil drawing is a drawing I came up with.
Right.
Do the things that I would usually do with my own drawing. So I did a version like that, and, you know, it was interesting and stuff, but I felt like it didn't capture like this like energy that Rob's thing had. So I did that version. And then I did another version like in pencil on paper in my, you know, sort of traditional mode. And then I did a version, which I think is the version I'm going to go with, where I tried to like, almost like Mike Royer on Jack Kirby, tried to be as true to the penciler and see his vision and just like maybe do a tiny bit of polish on what he created, but try to bring his vision like as clearly forward as possible and maintain the energy of pencil, make it look like these energetic, you know, pencil drawings that he did. So and then I'm coloring it too. I don't think they're going to actually use my color in the final version, but I'm like, anytime I'm asked to do something I always do my own full color version.
Right. Okay.
You know, whether they want it or not. So if they want to throw out my color, they can, or maybe it'll be helpful for the colorist, or, you know, or at least get like a little bit of my vision out there. And then at the very least, when the comic comes out, I can kind of post it online and say like, oh yeah, here's, you know, what I had in mind, you know.
And when is that coming out?
I don't know. Yeah, it's you know, if you know, if everybody else is inking their thing at the same time I am, then it'll be, yeah, like 3 months from next week.
Right. And so do you so have you got sort of a plan to put something out soon, a physical thing? Have you got any plans for that this year, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, like I have what artists, you know, with this Jack Kirby book, the publisher, they have first you know, rights or whatever, or first refusal. I don't know the ins and outs, but they want to do another book with me. So
oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so I'm sending them ideas and things and whatever, and you know, waiting for a yes. So there hasn't been a yes. So but then if there is a yes, I don't know that it would be complete in time for this year. And then I'm also you know, hoping to get that call from, you know, Marvel, DC, IDW,
Yeah.
blah blah, you know, whoever else is out there, to like, hey, do you want to do a, you know, XYZ? And sure. So maybe something like that would come out. And then the other thing would be, am I ready? Like, do I want to bring, you know, crowdsourcing, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever? Do I want to bring that bag of bricks down on my head? Because that is an option. It's a great option. I see people, you know, like doing it all the time, and it's yeah, like we were talking about the democratization of the, like, it's very democratizing, very empowering. It's just like, it's a commitment. It's like, okay, am I ready to have my garage, which is where I am right now, am I ready to have this thing filled with boxes of comic books that I am going to have to put in an envelope and mail out? Do I, you know, am I ready for that? And it's like, if the right comic comes along, then yes, but that's got to be a pretty damn special comic.
Yeah.
To commit those hours to you know, filling envelopes. But and again, it's like, you know, that's an awesome option to have, and you know, but so there's the answer to your question. So if any one of those things happen, then yeah, there'll be a physical comic book of mine available soon. But otherwise, like, the next physical product of mine that's going to be available will be my beautiful introduction to Jack Kirby's greatest work, which would be the Absolute Fourth World. It's like this. It's 2 volumes. They're like super huge. Like, it's basically the 10 Commandments. That
Right.
volume 2, and volume 2 has like all Jack's best comics, like the best comics he's ever made,
Right.
are in that one.
Right. So the publisher put out the Jack Kirby comic, and there's so much I could talk to you about. We might have to do a sequel to this.
Yeah, we'll do a follow up at some point.
But so the publishers that put that out, are they looking for something similar to that, or something totally different, just something that was done by you?
Oh, for the Jack Kirby book, they're really open to anything, like whatever, you know, like what they're. I mean, again, it's like this sort of, you know, first refusal or whatever it is. That doesn't include, you know, if I, like, they're not looking to publish like a, you know, like a Fantastic Four or a
No.
you know, like any other kind of like comic book that I do is not part. Like if you know, I could go off and do whatever someplace else, but they're looking for something that would be for like the book buying audience.
Yeah,
so
like a companion.
Yeah, maybe another biography, but not necessarily. It, you know, could be a work of fiction, but it would be something that you know, fits more squarely in that world, where, you know, not. But yeah, I don't think they're looking for like, you know, some like caped, costumed whatever, you know. But maybe, I mean, you know, you can transcend genre. You can make something that's so wonderful, you know, like Dark Knight Returns, something that's so wonderful that it sort of transcends the genre that it's in, and it becomes something that's more I don't know, like book audience worthy.
I think it must have been a little bit frustrating because last year that was your year for Jack Kirby. I know that there was going to be the comic book day. We're putting out like a little excerpt of it, and then you were going to be. I would imagine maybe even had events booked. You were maybe going to travel the globe.
Yes, all those things were in the plan. Yeah.
All the things that
but they didn't happen, but they were all planned. Plane tickets were bought, and this and that.
Yeah, and but then of course those are all the things that you were going to do this year, and then that's kind of not gone to plan anyway either. But I think hopefully 2022 will be the year when, and I think it'd be quite nice to then have the chance, knowing how well the comics have been received, to then meet people in public and talk about them sort of maybe retrospectively a little bit as well, and have a chance to sort of build an audience, and maybe even then a bigger audience comes to these events. But then it's a funny old world, because you kind of think, do we want big audiences at these events? I kind of organise mine. It's a small event, and as one of the things that goes into putting an event together is that you want it to be a success, and you want people to come, and you want after the event to go, 1,000 people came, or this many people came. But now we're at a point where we kind of think, do we really want 1,000 people? Let's just have 10, 15 people. That'd be quite nice.
It just sort of goes to show, like yes, you need to plan and try to create something that's as successful as possible. But like ultimately, the success or failure of an enterprise is largely out of your hands. So put as much of your energy and whatever into just the thing itself, and then just sort of be at peace with whatever happens afterwards. Again, these are easy things to say and harder things to do, but yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
So we'll kind of we're getting close to an hour, Tom. So we'll kind of start to sort of to wrap up in a minute. But have you been to any events in the UK?
Never. Yeah, and I probably would have, in some alternate parallel universe version of like this year and the past year, but no, I haven't.
Yeah, I as well as organising mine, I have I'm involved with a couple of events, and I was chatting to a lady called Julie Tate yesterday, and she is the festival organizer of a comic festival called the Lakes International Comic Art Festival, who have been a big supporter of what I do. In fact, the YouTube channel that we're broadcasting, they helped me sort of set that up right at the start of last year, when the everything went and hit the fan in sort of March. And that's a great event. It's very European kind of style. It doesn't take place in one room or multiple rooms. It's spread across the town. And
the Lamb.
Yeah, exactly like that. And I know that you've been there. So, and we have another one called Thought Bubble. Those are kind of the two kind of real sort of comic art festivals, and I think you'd be very at home at those, Tom. And one day when I have a large budget for my event, my budget is very, very, very small, but I do try to do great things with it. But it's great to be able to involve you in this way.
I assume that your festival is like part of the mission is to maybe educate the world on your town. Is that part of it too? Because I'm sure I'd like to learn something about it.
Yeah, so it's twofold. So it's about showing the town of Macclesfield what comics are. That comics aren't just, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Beano, but so that comics aren't just the Beano, or aren't just Spider-Man and Superman and Batman. Comics can be about this, and comics can be about personal experiences, and comics can be about characters that you've never heard of. And then also to show the people coming in for the event, the town itself. So it's kind of it was twofold. It was the great thing about Macclesfield is it's a very arts focused town. It's a small town, but a lot of arts. Music that came out of Macclesfield, such bands as Joy Division, and the like. And so it has a lot of, it's steeped in that kind of history. And the great thing about Macclesfield and the people who live here is if you put something on, and here's another Wayne's World reference, if you put something on, they will come, and they will. And so I think the trick then as the event organizer is to make sure it's the best thing that you can do. And so far, this is its 6th year. 2 of those have been virtual. Last year I did this kind of thing, but I did it over the course of one day, where I talked to 10 people on Instagram Live. It was pure insanity. I went in there with the enthusiasm of it and just blind craziness, and didn't realize until the end of the day just what I'd actually set myself up to do.
Yeah, sure.
But it's all about passion, isn't it? And that's what comics is. It's all about having the passion for comics, and I love talking about them and getting a chance to talk to people like yourself. And then I love the fact that I get to make them as well.
That passion is pretty much all that is fueling the comics industry. There's not enough of anything else to keep this thing going. So it really is the passion of the people who love comics that has kept it alive, this century. Yeah, no,
Tom, I can't think of a better way to end than on that profound statement, and it's totally true, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think creativity is what has got so many people through this past year, in general, whether it be comics, music, film, and just chat shows. Everybody's learned a new skill and still wanted to create things because they've had a captive audience, and I think what hopefully comes out of that is that captive audience that might even be a big percentage of new people, that they'll then stay with these creators when things start to become more of a normal life. They'll still stick with us all, and that's the hope, isn't it? So Tom, before we go, is there anywhere that you want to point people towards? I know that you and the great Matt Scioli do the Total Recall show.
The Total Recall show. Now, if you go, it's a YouTube show that we do, and we just talk about culture, film, occasionally comics too. And if you search for it on YouTube, you'll probably get like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall. So if you just do like Total Recall Scioli, like just do my last, then it pops right up. And so that's one place. Another place, is my Patreon. And again, go to patreon.com and then search Tom Scioli, and you'll find me. And then keep your eye out for Fantastic Four Grand Design. It's available, wherever you get your comics. And then we got Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli.
Tom, whose genius idea? Because again, I saw the cover of the Fantastic Four Grand Design without realizing that you were the Transformers, the guy that I knew from the Transformers. Whose genius idea was that with the spot varnish for Sue Storm?
I mean, it was a collaboration because I came up with the concept of just don't have her there.
Yeah.
Like, and then even some people who saw it were like, oh, maybe you could have a dotted line or whatever. And I thought, no, this is economical. It's I thought it was like a great solution, just have like nothing there. And then somebody in the production department, I forget exactly who, and please, if you're watching this video, come in, and so I can properly credit you. But somebody in the production department said, oh, well, if you'd like, we could add a spot varnish. And I was like, that's like the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's amazing. So I drew, the little spot varnish silhouette. And again, like, wow. And if I had drawn a dotted line or whatever, that just wouldn't have been an option. It would have, but yeah. So yeah, it was collaboration, which is where some of the magic.
Yeah, no, definitely a creative collaboration. I remember seeing it, and I have a graphic design background as well, and I remember saying to my wife, who's also a graphic designer, a shout out to my wife Jane, and I just said, look, she's a comics fan because she kind of indulges me,
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, but she, I'll be honest with you. So I can, well, let me just tell you this bit. So yeah, so I showed her that, And I was like, look at this. This is absolute genius. This is just genius. And we love a spot varnish. Anybody who works in
effective use of a spot varnish is like, I'm always a fan of that. And like, I love this book. Like, I'm immensely proud of what I've done.
It's a great comic.
Page every line. But I think that's my favorite part is that little spot varnish on the cover. I think this is probably the most effective cover I've ever done. Like the other covers I've done kind of fit squarely in like ideas of what a comic book cover.
Yeah.
This is more like just, you know, broader design. So yeah.
Well, I know that I saw you and Ed talking about that's the kind of cover that people spot from across the shop. Mm-hmm. And that's what, and so it's the opposite of having a standard kind of cover, but then with a sort of maybe a graphic take on the inner. I think it having that graphic cover, and then when people open up and they go, oh, it's a comic book,
right.
And because that then can attract, you know, the people who have that love of design. So you maybe get a new reader just because that you've sold them on that amazing cover. So yeah, hats off to you, Tom. Hats off to you. Well, Tom, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah,
and thank you so much for your time. If you haven't had breakfast, please go and get some.
Grab something to eat. Yeah.
I'm going to go and have a late lunch now. So yeah, I'll so stay well. Keep making those comments. I really do look forward to seeing what you're going to do next. And thank you so much for being involved today. And hopefully maybe we can meet in the future in real life, Tom.
I would love that. I'm ready for that.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So Tom, I'm just going to finish off saying that on Thursday next week, I will be talking to cartoonist James Kachalka. So he's going to be. I'm going to be chatting to James. So I'm looking forward to that. So, but yeah, this show, Tom, you can share. I will be sharing this on Twitter, and I can tag you, so it's an easily shareable link. It's a lot easier than sharing stuff on Instagram, which is one of the reasons.
A little more complicated sharing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I'm gonna end as we started, Tom. I'm gonna you know, in a nice way, I'm gonna throw you out of the chat, but I'm gonna end with this, Tom. So thank you very much, Tom Scioli. Take care, Tom. Thank you. Stay well. Bye. Thank you very much again to Tom Scioli. That was I really enjoyed that. I'm a big fan of his work, and getting a chance to talk to him and even draw out some little exclusives was really great. So yes, please tune in on Thursday next week, Thursday the 3rd of June at 1:30 p.m. I'll be chatting to the cartoonist James Kachalka, and as always, this channel is the Macc-Pow online, Macc-Pow at Home. Is supported by Macclesfield Town Council, so I'm very thankful. And yeah, thank you for watching. Take care, stay well, bye-bye.